update. We did have a meeting we started this year to bring back, I guess, our cafeteria committee. Tom joined it as well as Terry was already on it. What we decided to do this year was to meet with all of the full-time, permanent, and part-time staff, as well as Kathy and the committee, to try to go back through some of the things that were decided or discussed last year that were partially tried or not completely followed through, because we're still concerned about certain areas. So I think the meeting was very positive, it was productive, and we will have another group meeting in a couple of weeks. What had happened though, after that, it was kind of ironic because they're saying there's a couple of days that are just really hectic in the cafeteria, and it ends up if there's the juice comes in, there's a state food comes in, and it's Turkey Day, because turkey's a big deal. That just takes everyone working together as a finely tuned machine, and that they really felt they needed more staff at times. But what ended up happening, they were out with 2 people, and the 3 people in one sub came in and were able to do all of it in one day. And all come out still with all their hands, fingers, and speaking to each other. So when they pulled together and realized that they could, change a few things, there's nothing but to keep saying thank you to them, because they made that day work, and it was very appreciated. So we're just trying to work on some of those issues, and the committee will keep meeting and getting together.
Thank you for the swim records.
The swim records board is, there's a picture there, the swim committee team, actually built that themselves, created it with some help from some of the people here in the building, but some of the girls really put a lot of time into the sanding. It was all cut from and painting. Some of those records have been around for quite a few years, and we already had 2 broken in the last month by the same person. But so Kay was kind of teasing them, saying, "So do you take the board down, give it to the person that they're replacing?" She said, "Heck no, we paint over it." And it was like, "Do you find those people and give them?" She's like, "No, we paint over it." And I was like,
It's
just like, "You're gone."
They're out of here.
So the board is up there, poor John, you won't be having to get up there very much to change those things, they're back up all that ladder again. So it's a very nice thing, it was made in the memory of Lisa Huebner-Lane, even though we didn't officially say that in the written article, because we didn't necessarily have total family permission, it was in the memory of our former superintendent. But a lot of people wanted that known, so that was very important to us. And the reduced speed zone, yay, 10 years later, we finally got our reduced speed zone. We have our signs out there. We had the police even come over and put the speeding tracers.
That's a good thing.
It has slowed people down. It really has slowed them. They're like,
My neighbor already got a ticket.
who did?
My neighbor.
When I left here from the cafeteria committee, right down the hill by the sign was a stage worker sitting there.
And they will stay for the next couple of months and watch that for us. I guess 45 is better than what it was, but we were hoping for 30, but we were very happy to get 45. So it took a while, but we were very
I don't
pleased.
think they did a very spectacular job as far as marketing goes, but maybe there's more in their plans for it.
No, that's it. Because I was waiting for the blinking light thing and a little bit more, but I just called to check, but to thank them. Because truly, someone sat out here and they did a study, and so it was appreciated they took the time to do
Did
this.
they make a mistake in their original one or something? Did they paint it over? Or was that an old school sign there?
I think it was just the old school sign thing.
Again, yesterday, a week ago, I'm coming up to it, stop at Mr. Bullock's next door, put the mail in, here's 2 people parked out there, and I'm going down the road, and both of them did U-turns right in front of the traffic. It's a dangerous
It is,
situation out there.
very much so.
It would be nice, where we got the school sign, they put 45 right across there, right below the school sign or something. Just getting used to it now, it's 45.
It takes a while.
Couple of tickets here and there.
Well, that's all it takes. So, slow people down.
Is there anything else?
start, remember I had talked about asking permission to put an extra bus run on. We did start that bus run on the 15th, and we did not miss one person. So it went much smoother than we had anticipated, and we have, divided up the buses, and things seem to be going pretty well with it. He would like me to just do a little report on the library in Basra, of where we stand with that, as your committee met.
You know, a little background information. Okay, so the library in Basra is the third or second book in hand book for third grade, as part of the new modules. It's the story of a librarian in Basra, who, when the city is being bombed in Iraq, takes all the books out of the library, hides them in her house, hides them in neighborhood restaurants, things like that. And then the library is bombed, and she is seen by some to be a hero for protecting the history of Basra, and it's based on a true tale. It was brought to our attention that a parent was concerned about that particular story because of its wartime setting in Iraq, its images of a burning building, of airplanes dropping bombs, of soldiers carrying guns. They're childlike drawings, if you haven't had a chance to see them. So once we got that sort of request to not have that book be taught, we really needed to sit and work out a protocol for making decisions about how we handle parent requests of that sort. So the first step was to consult with education law, and so I consulted with our school attorney, who stated, based on education law and based on a couple of federal cases, that the school does in fact have the right to provide curriculum, and does not need to accommodate the requests of parents who may find the information or the text or the subject matter in any way problematic, whether that's based on faith, non-faith beliefs. The only exception is when there's a health and hygiene lesson in a health class, for instance, birth control, where parents want their students exempted. And that is possible so long as a member of, a church leader, member of a recognized church, submits a request for that exemption. So we sort of just got the case law, so we understood where we stood when it came to any kind of concerns voiced about a text. The second step was to form a committee, and that committee consisted of the 2 third grade classroom teachers, our librarian, me. We invited Reggie, but he couldn't show up. So we had a meeting, and we started out just by talking about the legal foundations, and then we talked about people's concerns. So the concerns of the classroom teachers were noted, the concern of the parent was noted, my own ideas and concerns were noted, and we also then talked before we made any decision about sort of what would happen next. What's the next step in a process like this? If you are to take a book out of a curriculum, what kind of criteria would you need to reinsert another book? Because it's one thing to say that we could just teach in the book, but we are up against 2 things. It's got to be taught at the level of rigor that is sort of demanded of that time of year. It's got to be a book that's at a certain level of complexity, because it kind of goes up in terms of complexity. And hopefully it would be a book from which all of the skills that are taught for the other book could be taught with that book. So we had that conversation, and we did identify that because of the way the 3rd grade is modifying the modules so that they're in sort of chunks of instruction, that we could, in fact, put another book in that place. So we, as a committee, decided to take that book out of instruction permanently, collect all books.
Were there more people that had concerns with that parent? Was there other?
No, there were not more parents with concerns, but there were internal concerns enough that unless we had an almost parallel curriculum to help support our young learners when it comes to understanding the concept of war, understanding the concept of violence in some way, shape, or form on a third grade level, and understanding what are some fairly morally ambiguous parts of that book, such as the librarian seeks permission from her sort of governmental, departmental person to remove the books. And even when the person says no, she goes in and does it anyway. We don't currently have a foundation in place to support, nor do we have the time in place right now, because this is the first year of the modules, to support any of that. So we would be teaching a text that's got some violence, it's got some ambiguity about, following the rules, and there's enough consensus that it's difficult material for the children, that it would be irresponsible for us to do that at this time. There are still some concerns. One of them is that it's a big concern, but only time can really address it. There's the idea that third graders shouldn't be exposed to any of this kind of information. And I pointed out, just as a sort of devil's advocate, that by fifth grade, students do a pretty substantial study of human rights. They look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They're depending on looking back on a lot of information taught in fourth grade about human rights, a lot of information taught in third grade about human rights, a lot of information taught really beginning in second grade about human rights. Second grade tees up the students because it looks at ancient civilizations and Eastern civilizations and Middle Eastern civilizations. It does set a context for third grade. So there is kind of like this thread that goes through. We have to be really careful when we pull one thing out of the thread. Now we're moving forward to fifth grade, we're saying, yeah, like about librarian Basra and women who wore burqas and this whole idea that, there's a whole bunch of different ways of looking at human rights. So we're just going to try and be really thoughtful about it. Whatever text goes back into that has to build that background knowledge. Otherwise, we're slowly taking every brick out of the wall and eventually it's going to crumble. So
You make it sound like it's perfect, can't be changed at all. Is it perfect to the point we can't change it?
no, it's not perfect to the point we can't change it. It's super duper purposeful. So we have to make sure that what we take out, we very purposefully put something else back in there that needs a pretty specific checklist.
How many books do they have? Like third grade level? Do they have quite a variety of books to choose from? Or is there just?
This book is not a student, this one was there's another problem with this one, only in that this book was a book that was designed to be read independently, and then an assessment was based on it. So it was super embedded in there as we're going to use this text, which happens to have, hardcover on each side, and we're going to have students do an assessment based on this. There are other choices of books. There are even some books on there's a related text, recommended text list. We did identify another potential book for the future, but what we decided for now was to lift that book out. There's some questions about pacing anyway, and how much time third graders need to catch up on writing, that we do need to make sure that what's assessed there, it's assessed in the next text. So it's not perfect, but to go back to your question, Tom, it's a text that has a test associated with it, and that test is our best prediction of where students are in terms of the performance on the state test, so we have to be really purposeful about what we put in its
But
place.
it all,
and
it
how we
all
use
boils
that
right down to that someone from outside of the district is telling us what to teach, core, right? It's all that,
test. No one is telling us what to teach.
so we don't need to teach these modules.
No one in New York State would say that we need to teach these modules. New York State Education Department put forward a model of the level of complexity we need to be teaching our students at, and put out full lesson plans, many of which are completely scripted, to cut down on the immense amount of stress of redesigning lessons. That would be a very significant, drastic difference from what students are doing at grade level now. So if New York State says, we need you to change and become more rigorous, but they don't give us a model of what they're saying rigor is, then we continue along that line of like, well, mine's rigorous enough. No, mine's rigorous enough. And this kind of settles the score on what rigor is. It doesn't have to be that text, it's just what they also did simultaneously is say, our kids need to be much more complex thinkers. We want more time spent on that. They also need to understand about the world and social studies and science at the same time, and we are kind of asking for less time spent on those, so we're going to combine the two. So you can do whatever you want. You absolutely don't have to adopt the modules, but the amount of work, just to use the example of the 6th grade text, the alternative text that we devised, that lesson plan, that unit, will take 60+ hours to devise. And that's for one marking period. So no, we don't have to use the modules, but it would be very difficult for me to ask a teacher to take 240 to 360 extra hours in 1 year outside of teaching to devise a rigorous curriculum. So no, we don't have to teach it, but I don't know what the manageable option B would be at a time like this. And schools and districts in an orderly, reasonable fashion do need to look at the texts at each grade level and do need to make some decisions, but they can't just be made on, I don't feel comfortable with this, or our children may never leave Russell, so why do they need to know about the Middle East, or any kind of those arguments. They've got to be made, whatever text gets lifted out of the 3rd grade, if we decide to text out of the 5th grade gets lifted, it's got to meet those same criteria. Otherwise, it's turning willy-nilly on us, and all of a sudden we have this shambles of a well-thought-out curriculum. And I will defend it, it's a very well-thought-out curriculum. What you
You're
see
talking
in
about
kindergarten.
8-year-old kids?
Hmm?
You're talking about 8-year-old kids with this library and Basel or whatever it is?
Yeah, I'm not defending the selection of the text, I'm defending
Well,
the rigor
I don't
of
expect
the...
8-year-old kids to understand the complexities of the world and what's going on in Iran and Saudi Arabia, do you?
That is up for debate, and what we decide to bring into our value system has to somehow be tempered by a framework. Because we could argue all night about whether or not we think that library and Basel should be taught. The bigger question is, and the question that we used is, in our setting, in our school setting, with what students know about the world, and our ability and time right now to make up the difference between that, we decided not to teach the text. We need to, in the future, put another text in its place, not one that necessarily has to be about a librarian saving books, but there's a bigger theme, and it's about a yearning for knowledge and at all costs seeking out education. We have to put something in its place. It doesn't matter what I think. What matters is that
Well, I
all
think it
texts
does.
go
You're an
up.
educator, it certainly does matter what you think.
Well, how much bearing is this gonna have on the kids? How much of a disadvantage is this gonna have on the kids when they start taking these, a test that we're basing, where they stand as far as class?
Which was part of the reason that we chose at this point to adopt the modules, because when you're giving them at the 10th hour, we didn't have the time, the money, or the space to adapt them fully. It's not to say in time we won't do that, but to start, it wasn't a possibility. And one of the things I want to say is just, you know, when you're talking about war, one of the social study things at third grade is the 1812 war. So for a parent to think their child's not going to learn something, you know, what war, whether it be, you know, here within our own area or abroad, that topic is going to be touched on at some point.
There was more loss of life in those wars than there are in any of those wars that fought since then.
Right. But one of the things, and Amy and I talked about this at length, is, you know, some of our children don't understand the complexity. Where is Basra? I mean, and there was no social studies unit prior to it to say, you know, can you walk there? Can you ride your bike? Can you, you know, do you have to take a plane? And all of that was missing. And that was one of the things we said, because the teachers were physically uncomfortable, because some kids knew about children of abroad and things in other countries, you know, whereas other kids didn't, nor did they have anybody at home talking to them about it. And we
Some
just
children
said,
thought it was happening as close as
Ogdensburg was Basra. And, you know, that's what we said, you know, we have to take a step back here and start teaching, you know, first of all, if we're going to teach a book like that, where is the country? And showing somebody a map's not going to show them, you know, where that is. So that's why I said maybe the social studies units need to be a little more embedded through it, to be able to teach the cultures, the different places, the, you know.
So who, that book that you're taking out and you're gonna think you have another one to put in, who's developing the curriculum, the new curriculum modules for that? Would that be you or the teacher, or are you gonna work on it together?
That would be the teacher, that one would be done, that would be done over the summer. We're gonna forego it and put a big, like, bookmark there that says, come back to me.
So I read those books, and there's 2 books I actually didn't like, well, there's 3 anyway, but that's my own personal thing. I just don't see where an 8-year-old kid has to look at a soldier carrying guns. They're animated, I know. And there was lying in them, as you said. There was one, they asked the woman, why you had a gun? She said, to protect myself. I just don't think that's for an 8-year-old to know that, you know, we don't allow guns in school, but when they come around and say, protect myself, what's the child going to say? Well, some 8-year-olds will say nothing. Some are going to say, well, I got a gun to protect myself. You know, I was very concerned about some of that stuff.
And I guess that's why I say it doesn't matter what I think,
Yeah.
going back to your point. Because I'm not gonna layer my value system on top of the curriculum. It's gotta be the right fit for the community, it's gotta be the right fit for the students, it's gotta be the right fit for the teachers, and it's gotta be the right fit for the overall curriculum. Maybe second graders right now who are learning about the Middle East coming up next year are far better candidates for digesting a book like that. But then we might say, yeah, now they have the background knowledge, but it's still not a good fit for them emotionally, it's not a good fit for, so that's why, I mean, it doesn't matter what I think on that level. Like, keeping a very neutral stance on it and putting it up against other stuff is our safest way, because we will have other books that'll be challenged in a similar manner. But to be honest, just to answer your question, I would teach it to my own children, but they're my children, you know, and I can't make that decision for all in the same way.
I felt sorry for the teachers on the 2 books that I read. There was a lot of violence, and one was on slavery, and it was a lot of very graphic violence as far as, but that's history, you know, and you shouldn't do away with it just because it's uncomfortable, because it's history, you know, it can come back. If you forget the past, you're going to never relive it. So, but I was thinking about how the teachers are going to explain this, and yet they still not bother the kids from some of the phrases and certain statements in it. So it's a very touchy rope to walk.
That one that you asked about that I read, that's what that is. I mean, that's all about war, so. No, it's.
In the other book, the son all of a sudden disappeared, so he was assumed he was killed. And then pretty soon, the mother goes out to find the son, and she never comes back. And then the child goes into seclusion, she doesn't talk to people or anything else. And I'm just concerned about what happens. We have a 8-year-old kid that's lost his uncle, his brother over there. How are they going to deal with that? You know, did the teachers, this year was late, but did they ever get to look at all the modules and go through each one of them? Like pick out the books they want to teach? Did they ever
they call them the central texts. The central texts are the ones that a student has in hand. And then there are often texts that are read aloud or are just you read excerpts or things like that. So for right now, because people are 2 weeks ahead, you know what I mean, in terms of planning, because it all came out very, very late.
How about next year? The teachers are going to be able to decide what books they want to teach next year.
I think at least from the high school, they'll have a better understanding of it. I mean, again, Amy mentioned that they're maybe 2 weeks ahead. I'll bet there's some that are days. 'Cause it's
Well,
all
unfortunately, I think
happening
that one
so
book, they were
fast.
a day or two ahead. And
It's an incredible amount of material to get through to try to kind of pick and choose what pieces you're going to use, because sometimes you just can't use it all, so.
but then there are other suggested books, and, you know, when we know that this is not a book we want, we need to look at the other suggested books and see how we feel about them. Can it just be dropped in, or is it something we have to seek further? But that's the hope, is at the end of this year, the teachers have a better understanding of what's in there, what they can switch it out with, or we're gonna have to find something else. And I think Julie Bailey is gonna take some extra time and starting to look at themes, and the librarians are doing that as a group. So that should be helpful for us.
Yeah, I just feel that we don't have any choice in this really. The state's mandating this, and this is what you've got, and I just don't see where we're getting. After this year, I think the teachers will know, and they can pick some of these books out that they don't think are appropriate and maybe replace them. But right now, they're just, here's your books, and you take it or you don't like. I don't like that. Our state's just, and I see where the teachers are frustrated with the modules and everything else, because they just, here you go, this is the way it is. You don't have a,
But take it also from the point, Reggie, I just have to say this,
Yeah.
it's not just New York, there's
No.
43 other states. Some are, you know, a little further ahead, some are further behind. But I have to say that so that people don't just think it's just New York State,
It's better.
because it is a federal thing that's come down. I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent,
I just,
but it has changed things drastically.
I would like to just meet these people, and make these choices for some of these books. I'd just like to see who they are and, you know, what nationality they are. Excuse me, but it's just, I think something's being forced on us, which I don't.
Well, they're trying to give a whole worldview. That's truly the bottom line, and they're trying to start at second grade, and when we live in an environment that's 99% white, I mean, that is a very difficult thing to bring in when it's not being discussed at home. Or even if the teachers aren't comfortable discussing the differences. And that's, I think, one of the things we started to find out as we talk more. Instead of the teachers stepping up and saying, whoa, I don't like this, they just were teaching it. And that concerns me, actually.
You also have a very conservative area here, a small,
Yes.
covered, or
We don't see it.
closed area here. It's not like in inner cities where we pick up the newspapers to shootings and stuff like this. But, you know, we're on a global thing now, not just a local.
Right.
Well, it's not so much what they're learning, but the age they're learning it. Maybe we should wait a few years before we force war and rape and all that stuff on our kids. Give them a chance to grow up a little bit, then let them get into that stuff. I mean, we've got veterans all over this county that have grandkids and kids. Our kids know about war. They know what happened. They know they've got aunts and uncles and dads and never came back. It's nothing new to them. But learning it the way they do it in another country might not be all that helpful.
Well, the great irony is that it was a U.S. plane that bombed the library in Belgium.
Was that the story where the lady took all the old ancient books that were very valuable and they were trying to destroy them, and she
Yes.
hid them through the town?
Mhm.
I read that.
But it's, you know, something in our country that we don't have to fight for education, everyone's given an education. And in a country like that, it's very different. But are children of that ability or age to grasp that yet? I don't know, because they are all like, oh, I don't want to be in school. You know, I mean, so,
The one book on slavery, they, basically the slaves that had learned how or been taught to read were basically killed because they were going to go back and corrupt the rest of them, as they said. So, to a kid this age, it's going to be shocking that people can get killed for what they know. And graphic violence, as far as what happens if you get caught learning
change anything in our curriculum based on anything except that health hygiene one. Like, I don't want my child reading a book with explicit sex because we're faith X and my priest who wrote a letter says that we're not doing that. So we are obligated then to do an alternative curriculum. But we put it on, if the scale had like 5, dishes on it, parental concern would be 1. Then the capacity of our teachers and the comfort level of our teachers, the capacity and comfort level of our students, whether or not they have background knowledge, etc. And there's probably something else that goes here. It's definitely a process in the making. It's a good question because it's the second time it happened. And in retrospect, we discovered that we had the right to refuse to offer an alternate curriculum for the 6th grade scenario. But in a way, it's okay because it helps you understand, and it wasn't, having to do that once is motivation to never want to have to do that again unless you have summer time to do it. So it's, that's the silver lining of it.
Ironically,
We'll cross it again.
Of the other 17 out of the 18 school districts, not one other school district was discussing that book. Which I think, wow, we're not that far from our other, neighbors, but we were the only school that had it brought up as a concern.
So they're all teaching the same books.
So the majority from the meeting I was at with superintendents that had adopted the modules, there was not that concern.
But you look at what's on TV or what's in your movies,
Video games.
they're all basically based on the same thing. That's what sells them, so.
Well, and also, and this is where it is super slippery slope. So if you look at another recommended text in the 3rd grade, it's called When Vergie Goes to School. So Vergie is an African-American young girl in the South. And I know a lot of people know there was a picture of a burning building in the library in Boston. So I opened up and there's a picture of Vergie's church on fire, and that's in the United States of America. So it's so complex. Every one has a slightly different angle. Do we feel more comfortable because that's part of our American history? And so it seems like it's better and okay for our children to learn about that history. So it's just trying to be really consistent about how we make a decision about books is the best we can do. There is no, short of saying no, it'll be taught. And that's not going to make anybody happy. That doesn't seem
I
right.
like your committee idea, because it keeps away from the whole censorship, and yet it still keeps an open mind, and what better people to ask about, how to teach the program, than teachers that have to teach it, so.
That comes from our own policies.
The danger if another parent expresses a similar concern, and let's say parent A in this situation had a problem with the book that's now removed, parent B comes along with a new book and says, hey, I don't like this book, get it out, you did it for parent A, why don't you do it for me? So we want to avoid that.
Right,
So
second
now
one
maybe
there.
approach it to say, if we can have a pre-approval system that would maybe run the book through that system ahead of time, maybe.
That would be the ideal, yeah.
It's a growth, it's a learning process, every day.
And I don't know if doing it in advance in the end, just to make myself feel better, is any more possible or more meaningful, or sometimes if like right at the moment where you say, oh, if it's just as, because you're right there, you're right there, it's just as clunky. The other way looks clean, and this way looks clunky, but ultimately it should go up against the same criteria, and you should have the same result, whether you look at it in advance or look at it.
Sure.
So that's the hope, that's the design.
That's a good idea to get the legal opinion on it, so we know where we have to start from, so.
Right. That was a bit of a relief. Well, it wasn't a bit, it was a huge relief.
That was it on my list. That was the last thing. I saved the best for last.
Thank you for the time. Obviously, put it there.
Good discussion.
Yes.
I apologize for being late and,
You're gonna have to stay in the box.
I just did. Just got none of that. So, we're in executive session, one, is that where? Yeah, motion to enter executive session.
So.
Richard,
I'll second.
Lynn, all in favor? Any opposed?